It all started on what was supposed to be a calm Saturday morning. I was finally packing up and moving out of my HOA neighborhood after years of dealing with ridiculous rules, random fines, and the occasional nosy neighbor. The sun was barely up, and I had a moving truck parked out front, loading up boxes and furniture, just minding my own business. But of course, in every neighborhood like this, there's always that one person. You know the type, the self-appointed ruler of the block. Around here, we all knew her as Karen. And right on cue, she showed up, marching down the sidewalk like she owned the place. She didn't like that my truck was on the curb, didn't like that I was making noise too early, didn't like that I was leaving the HOA at all, to be honest. She tried to bark orders at me, snapping pictures, muttering about rules and proper exit procedures, whatever that means. I tried to stay calm, told her it was all cleared with the board and I was just trying to get this move done in peace. But she wasn't having it. Next thing I know, she's on the phone with the cops, acting like I'm committing some kind of felony by loading a couch. Now here's where things take a turn. The officers show up, looking confused. I calmly walked over, introduced myself, and that's when I pulled out my FBI badge. You should have seen Karen's face. Her whole attitude froze mid-sentence, eyes wide, mouth open. She had no idea who she'd been messing with, but that wasn't the end of it. Not by a long shot. What happened next? Let's just say, things got even more awkward and way more revealing than anyone expected. Karen went completely silent. She just stood there, frozen like a statue, clutching her phone with both hands. You could almost hear the gears in her head trying to spin. The officers glanced at each other, clearly picking up on the weird tension. One of them stepped forward and asked me a few routine questions. Nothing unusual. But Karen kept butting in, still trying to play the neighborhood enforcer. The thing is, I wasn't flashing my badge to intimidate anyone. I only did it because I knew she was trying to paint me as some sort of threat, and I wanted to make it clear that I wasn't. Just some random guy she could push around. While the officers talked to her, I started thinking about everything that led up to this. I'd lived in this HOA community for over 5 years. At first it was fine. Quiet neighborhood, decent people, nothing too crazy. But things started changing when Karen somehow got herself on the HOA board. Suddenly, we were getting fined. For things like leaving trash bins out 10 minutes too long or having a garden hose in view from the street. She seemed to have a personal vendetta against anyone who didn't follow her imaginary rulebook. And it wasn't just me. I'd heard stories from other neighbors, families getting citations for harmless things, like chalk drawings on their driveways or holiday lights being too bright. I'd had enough. That's why I decided to leave. No drama, no fights, just quietly move out and be done with it. But clearly, Karen couldn't let that happen. It's like she needed to feel in control one last time. The cops started asking her more pointed questions now. I could tell they were picking up on something off, but there was something else. Something strange about the way she kept glancing at the truck, almost nervously. That's when I started to wonder, what was she really trying to hide? As the officers kept questioning Karen, I noticed her mood shift from fake confidence to visible discomfort. She kept fidgeting, eyes darting between the moving truck and the cops. At first, I thought it was just the embarrassment of realizing she couldn't bully her way through this like she usually did. But the more I watched her, the more I realized she wasn't just upset. She was nervous, like something was seriously wrong. That's when my instincts kicked in. Being in law enforcement for years, you learn to read people. Her body language wasn't screaming annoyed neighbor anymore. It was more like someone trying to cover up something. Meanwhile, one of the officers pulled me aside and quietly asked what exactly I was doing in the neighborhood and why Karen had called. I explained everything, how I'd sold the house, had approval from the HOA to move, and had been respectful the whole time. He nodded slowly, clearly realizing this whole situation had been blown out of proportion. I also mentioned, casually, that Karen had a history of targeting certain neighbors more than others, especially anyone who didn't play along with her self-made rules. While we talked, one of the movers came over to tell me something odd. He said when they went to grab a few boxes near the sidewalk, Karen had actually walked over and stood behind the truck, watching them like a hawk. He didn't think much of it until she started taking pictures of the labels on the boxes. That made no sense. Why would she care what I was packing? It started adding up in strange ways. Maybe this wasn't just about her being petty. Maybe there was something in this move that made her feel exposed. I couldn't shake the feeling she wasn't afraid of me leaving. She was afraid of what I might be taking with me. And whatever it was, she clearly didn't want it leaving this neighborhood. At this point, I couldn't ignore it. Something was seriously off. Karen wasn't just being her usual controlling self. She was sweating, avoiding eye contact, glancing nervously at the back of the moving truck like it held something she didn't want anyone to see. And even though I knew every single box on that truck was mine, packed by my own hands or the movers I hired, a small part of me started wondering, what if something was placed there without me knowing? One of the officers must have sensed it, too. He quietly walked around the truck, casually inspecting it while still keeping the tone light. Karen suddenly raised her voice, trying to distract him with some nonsense about a city ordinance and blocking the sidewalk. The other officer gave her a look, like he'd heard enough, and asked her flat out if she had a real reason for calling them in the first place. She stumbled through a half answer about community safety and unregistered vehicles. But the fear in her voice was louder than her words. Then came the moment that sent chills down my spine. One of the movers, a younger guy, came up, to me holding a small black envelope. Said he found it wedged under a box near the back of the truck. It wasn't mine. I took it and noticed there was no label, no name, just sealed tight. Karen saw it too. Her face drained completely. She took a step forward like she wanted to grab it, but then stopped herself when she saw the badge still clipped to my belt. My pulse was racing. I hadn't opened it yet, but I already knew this wasn't just some lost mail. Whatever was in that envelope had her on the edge of total panic. The officers noticed too. One of them stepped closer, hand near his radio. Just in case. Karen backed up, breathing fast, looking like she was deciding between running or making up one last lie. And right there, with everyone staring at this one envelope, it felt like something much bigger was about to break wide open. I held the envelope in my hand, and for a second, everything felt still. Karen wasn't even pretending anymore. Her mask had completely dropped. She was pale, visibly shaking, and clearly desperate for me not to open it. But before I could say a word, the officer standing nearby gently took it from me. "We'll need to take a look," he said, his tone calm but firm. Karen blurted out, "That's private. He stole that from my property." Her voice cracked, mid-sentence, and just like that, every bit of authority she thought she had vanished. The officer raised an eyebrow. "You said everything in the truck belonged to him. Now it's yours?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. It was over for her, or at least it looked that way. But just as the officer was about to unseal the envelope, his radio buzzed. He stepped away to answer, and that's when the second twist hit, hard. A black SUV rolled slowly down the street. Tinted windows, government plates. It pulled up without a sound, and two men in plain suits stepped out. Not local cops, not HOA board members. They moved with purpose, scanning the scene before one of them walked straight toward me and flashed credentials. Not FBI, internal affairs. My heart dropped. One of them said, "Agent Walker, we need to speak with you. Now." Karen's expression flipped instantly, from panic to something that almost looked like smug relief. Like she knew something I didn't. I stepped aside with the agents, and one of them quietly said, This isn't just about your move. There's an ongoing investigation involving someone in this neighborhood. We've been watching for weeks. That envelope might be part of it." Everything shifted in that moment. Suddenly, this wasn't just about a nosy neighbor or HOA drama. There was a bigger game playing out, one I didn't even realize I was caught in the middle of. And whatever Karen had been trying to stop might have been connected to something a whole lot deeper than a moving day gone wrong. The two agents led me a few steps away from the moving truck, voices low but serious. One of them opened a tablet and showed me surveillance photos, shots of my street, of Karen, even one of my house. "We've been tracking a leak from inside a federal database," he said. "And based on the digital footprint, the signal was traced right back here, to this neighborhood." I stared at the screen, trying to piece it all together. Karen? A data leak? It didn't make sense, until they said one more thing. "We believe someone was using HOA access to monitor residents, especially anyone in law enforcement. The pattern matches your profile." My stomach dropped. All those strange letters in my mailbox, weird network pings on my home Wi-Fi, neighbors getting fines for things that didn't make sense. It had all seemed like paranoia at first, but now it looked like Karen had been doing a lot more than just enforcing HOA rules. The envelope was finally opened by one of the officers while I stood with the agents. Inside were printouts, login credentials, screenshots of encrypted files, and a list of names, including mine, other federal agents, even 2 people from the Department of Justice. Karen wasn't just spying, she was stealing data, as the agents approached her. She tried to bolt, running straight across the lawn like she thought she could escape it all. But it didn't last 2 seconds. The officer closest to her stopped her cold. Cuffed, quiet, and no longer in control, Karen finally realized the HOA throne she'd built was crumbling beneath her. The neighbors started coming out one by one. Watching the whole thing unfold, I thought that was the end of it. Case closed, truth exposed, justice served. But just as I turned back toward the truck, one of the agents paused and looked at me. "By the way," he said, lowering his voice, "the leak wasn't working alone. There's someone else still, inside, and we think they knew you were coming today." That chill hit me all over again. Turns out, Karen was just the beginning. After everything settled, Karen was taken into custody, and the agent stayed behind to comb through what was left. I gave my full statement, and as they went through her files, it became clear she'd been running this operation for months, maybe longer. Using her HOA position as a cover, she was accessing residents' info, tracking law enforcement families, and selling pieces of sensitive data. The agents told me I likely wasn't even the main target. I was just the one who got too close without knowing it. Turns out, one of the movers had unknowingly loaded a box Karen had slipped near my garage weeks earlier, planted just in time to discover something she could report or manipulate if things ever got traced back. The black envelope? That was a backup plan. She probably panicked when it left her hands and assumed I'd figure everything out. She wasn't wrong. As for the second suspect, the agents didn't say much, just that they were narrowing it down. Someone else still living in the neighborhood, laying low, waiting. They promised to keep me updated. I moved out that same day. No way I was spending another night on that street. In the end, what started as a simple moving day turned into a full-blown federal investigation. Karen, the HOA queen, ended up exposed for something far more serious than writing fines and taking pictures of lawns. And honestly, it made me realize just how easily someone can hide behind rules and routine while doing damage no one expects. Now, when people ask me why I left that HOA, I don't even know where to begin. But I will say this. Sometimes the biggest threats don't come kicking down your door. Sometimes they're already next door, smiling, clipboard in hand.